Hello friends, I am glad to see you again. Today I will talk about the homeowners association that calls me and demands something. I knew the night was going to be strange the moment my cell buzzed itself off the nightstand at 2:57 a.m. I sleep like a rock. Towing company backup beeper levels of noise barely moved the needle for me. So the fact that I woke up at all told me something was seriously off. The caller ID glowed an unfamiliar number, but the area code matched my little slice of suburbia. So I swiped anyway. "Hello?" I croaked, half tangled in my comforter, trying not to squint at the glare. A woman with the crisp tone of someone used to being obeyed launched straight in. "This is Marlene, acting president of the Homeowners Association. We need you to power the clubhouse immediately. You have 10 minutes. My brain lagged 2 beats behind. "Excuse me? There's an outage across the whole grid." Her cadence suggested I ought to have known. "We see from last year's questionnaire that you own a portable generator. Plug our extension cord into your exterior outlet so the bridal prep crew can spin their records. You'll be reimbursed." Now I was awake. Outside, the cul-de-sac was drowned in blackout darkness, broken only by an anemic sliver of moon. My alarm clock was blank. The street lamps, dead. The outage was real, but so was my disbelief. "Let me make sure I heard that right," I said, sliding to the edge of the bed. "You want me to fire up my personal generator, route power through my outlet, and energize a building half a block away because someone forgot to rent battery speakers for a wedding rehearsal?" "It's for vinyl," Marlene snapped, as if that explained everything. "Analog equipment needs clean power. We've already snaked a cable to your porch. Just switch on." A distant male voice broke in behind her, thin, urgent, a little panicky. "Marlene, the quartet can't hear the tempo without the record. We start hair and makeup at 5. That had to be my neighbor Trent, notorious for hosting late-night block parties and bragging about his audiophile purity. He lived 2 doors down and apparently thought a total blackout was no obstacle to spinning 1950s soul in the wee hours. Back when the HOA convinced everyone to fill out that disaster preparedness survey, I'd naively listed my generator under emergency assets, assuming we'd all cooperate sensibly in a storm. I pictured pooling supplies, offering cell charges, that sort of thing. I had not foreseen Marlene treating my extension cord like the community credit card. I set the phone on speaker and padded to the front window. Sure enough, a fat orange cable slithered across my dormant lawn like an invasive vine, vanishing into the dark. "No," I said flatly, "not happening." "You signed the covenant granting reasonable access to community resources," Marlene shot back. "Reasonable means during daylight with my consent and only in genuine emergencies like medical devices," I exhaled, willing my pulse to slow. "A wedding soundtrack fails that test." She huffed, paper rustled, and she read, "Section 12B. Residents shall not unreasonably withhold privately owned life safety equipment in the event of neighborhood necessity." Life safety? I repeated. Turntables aren't life safety. Silence hung for a beat, then she tried a new tactic. "Look, Trent's fiancé is flying in at sunrise. The photographer is on a strict schedule. This rehearsal must proceed or the ceremony tomorrow collapses. Think of the happy couple." I did. I imagined them sipping mimosas while I sat sleepless, burning $50 of fuel so someone could feel vintage vibes. "No," I repeated more firmly. "Good luck, though." I thumbed end call and killed the screen. 2 seconds later, the doorbell rang. 3 frantic stabs that echoed up the hallway. My Shepherd mix Dax erupted downstairs. So it was going to be that kind of night. I yanked on jeans and a hoodie, flipped on my flashlight, and descended. Dax was already at the front door, hackles raised. Through the glass, I recognized Trent, his breath fogging the pain, an unplugged record clutched under one arm like a hostage. I cracked the door the minimal inch allowed by the safety chain. "Buddy," he wheezed, "I'll pay double whatever you burn. I just need 2 hours. "Trent, it's 3 in the morning. Please, Marlene said you'd comply if I asked politely." I laughed, low and tired. "Tell Marlene she was misinformed." He shifted his weight, desperate eyes darting toward the silent street. "Okay, triple. Cash in hand." I considered. The fuel tank held 6 gallons. At half load, the generator could run 8 hours. Triple market price would actually cover depreciation and then some, but principle mattered more than profit. If I caved, the HOA would smell fresh weakness every time the lights flickered. "Not for sale," I said. Trent's mouth worked like he wanted to argue. Then he spotted Dax's bared teeth and thought better. He backed down the steps, muttering, "You'll regret this when the board meets." "Sweet dreams," I called and locked the door. Dax settled once I scratched behind his ears, but the adrenaline refused to leave my bloodstream. I poured water, stared at the blackout beyond the kitchen window, and mulled my options. In theory, Marlene could fine me if she convinced the board I'd violated the covenant. Fines meant hearings, and hearings meant evidence, but evidence could cut both ways. I grabbed a notepad and began listing every procedural foul they'd committed tonight. Trespass by running a cable across private property, attempting unauthorized tap into my panel, harassing a resident after quiet hours, misrepresenting covenant language, and potentially creating a fire hazard. My dad, a retired fire marshal, pounded those safety codes into me growing up. A single undersized extension cord snaking across sod for 50 yards was a spark waiting to happen. The storm that had triggered the outage kept growling in the distance, thunder rolling like distant drums. The rain had slowed to a mist, but power crews wouldn't restore service until dawn at the earliest. While my coffee brewed on the gas stove, I opened the hall closet and eyeballed my generator, still folded on its wheel kit, pristine. I could roll it out and run my fridge and furnace fan, but the temperature was mild enough, food safe till morning. Part of me wanted to fire it up just to spite Marlene, but the racket would disturb the decent neighbors. At 3:30 a.m., my phone pinged again, this time a text from an unknown number. "Last chance, consent or faceboard action M." I ignored it. 20 minutes later, a second text arrived. Photographic evidence. Their orange cord now coiled around my breaker box, plug dangling inches from the outlet like a guilty limb. The caption read, "Awaiting your cooperation." That was the final straw. I snapped my own photo from inside, timestamp included, showing the cord violating my property line. Then another, closer, highlighting the sticker on the cable, rated for 10 amps, far below what their clubhouse would draw, proof of hazard. I drafted an email to the county electrical inspector with attachments, CCing the HOA secretary address the covenant listed for disputes. I kept the tone factual. Unauthorized attempt to draw power, after-hours disturbance, potential code violation, request for official guidance. By 4:15, I'd finished the paper trail and still couldn't sleep. So I sat at the dining table with Dax at my feet and kept jotting notes. The house was theoretically dark, yet the soft glow of my camping lantern felt like a small fortress. That's when sirens chopped the damp air. One patrol cruiser creeping into the cul-de-sac, spotlight sweeping. Someone must have dialed the sheriff. I slipped onto the porch just as the deputy climbed out. His flashlight landed on me first, then on the neon umbilical extending from my siding. "Evening," he said, approaching under the drizzle. "We got a call about a disturbance and possible electrical theft." "That would be me," I replied, gesturing him over. "Mind if I show you something?" He followed me to the eaves where the cord drooped. I explained the sequence: phone demand, trespass, refusal, threats. He listened, taking notes, eyebrow inching higher every minute. "Do you consent to them using your power?" he asked. "Absolutely not." He walked the cable's path with his light, muttering about tripping hazards. I trailed behind, umbrella overhead. When we reached the clubhouse grounds, a cluster of figures waited on the porch. Marlene clutching a sheaf of bylaws, Trent still hugging that record. Two bridal stylists in plastic ponchos shivering in the pre-dawn damp. They looked like a theater troupe caught rehearsing on the wrong stage. The deputy introduced himself, asked for clarification, and Marlene launched into a monologue about community spirit, critical timelines, and how my generator was technically communal because I declared it on the survey. He let her ramble until she tried to quote the covenant. Then he stopped her. "Ma'am, I've read plenty of HOAs. None override state property statutes. You need written permission to draw power from a private residence, especially at 3 in the morning." Trent's shoulders sagged. Marlene's lips thinned. "So what now?" she demanded. "Remove the cord immediately, and I'd advise you hold any further contact with this homeowner until daylight, unless you enjoy citations." He turned to me. "You want to press charges for trespass?" I studied the tableau. My neighbors damp and exhausted, their grand wedding warm-up in ruins. Part of me craved that decisive slam of accountability, but another part knew real justice often arrived more effectively through paperwork than jail cells. "Not tonight," I said, "but I'd like the incident documented." "You got it." He filled the case number on a card and handed it over. Back home, I finally killed the lantern and collapsed on the couch, adrenaline ebbing. Dax curled against my shins like a heating pad. Outside, I heard Trent and Marlene unplugging the cord. their whispers slicing the rainfall. The outage lasted until 8:12 a.m. when the HVAC clicked alive with a hum that felt like victory. I made pancakes, fed Dax, and began drafting a formal complaint to the board, citing the case number, inspector email, and every violated clause I could find. The more I wrote, the more connections branched. If the HOA president felt entitled to commandeer a residence generator, what else had they stretched? While I worked, a truck from the county inspector's office rolled past, yellow beacon spinning. Good, paperwork train was already arriving. At 10 a.m. sharp, right when civilized folks start weekend chores, Marlene's official board email dinged my inbox. Request for informal resolution. She proposed covering my fuel plus a gesture of goodwill if I'd withdraw the inspector complaint. I closed the laptop and contemplated strategy. This was bigger than reimbursement. It was about precedent. The board needed to learn that bullying residents under the guise of community service carried real consequences. I composed a polite reply. Thank you for your offer. Unfortunately, the matter has progressed beyond private settlement. I trust the board will cooperate fully with any county inquiries. Look forward to discussing best practices at the next open meeting. I clicked send, brewed more coffee, and began collecting signatures from neighbors who'd suffered similar overreach. Surprise landscaping fees, trash can citations, petty diktats about curtain color. By evening, I had 7 households on board for a recall petition. Turns out Marlene's midnight crusade was the straw after years of minor tyranny. Monday morning brought 2 developments. First, a certified letter from the HOA threatened me with a $500 non-cooperation fine. Second, the county fire marshal, my dad's former colleague, left me a voicemail. Saw your email. That cord setup violates 3 codes. I'll be at the inspection Wednesday. I smiled all the way to the copy shop where I printed the recall forms on bright neon paper. If the board wanted escalation, I'd give them a parade. Trent avoided me the next few days, but gossip traveled faster than power lines. Word spread that the clubhouse breaker panel showed scorch marks. My photo evidence now backed by a real hazard. Couples using the venue suddenly questioned future bookings. Money talked. At Wednesday's inspection, the marshal cited the HOA for negligent wiring maintenance and slapped a temporary closure notice on the clubhouse door. Marlene's expression as she tore down the event flyer was priceless. The board attempted one last intimidation play. They scheduled a disciplinary hearing for me Friday night, claiming I violated covenant spirit. I arrived with a folder thicker than a phone book. Police report, inspector citations, recall petitions. The meeting lasted 9 minutes. After I finished outlining potential liabilities, 2 of the 5 board members sided with me and motioned to dismiss all accusations. Marlene tried to salvage authority by proposing a mutual apology, but the room's silence crushed her. The motion died without a second. She adjourned, face crimson. Saturday dawned bright, and the repair crew finally restored safe power to the clubhouse. Too late for Trent's rehearsal, which had relocated to a rental hall 20 miles away. I heard they spent triple budget on last-minute arrangements, and the vinyl gear never left its crate. That afternoon, envelopes hit every mailbox. Announcement of a special election to fill 3 vacant board seats. Marlene and her loyal treasurer both resigned effective immediately. The recall petition had turned moot. She'd quit before the vote. In place of punishment through the courts, they punished themselves with humiliation, and the neighborhood finally sighed in relief. But the best epilogue came a week later when the county sent me a check. Reimbursement for fuel they assumed I'd spent powering emergency equipment. I hadn't burned a drop, but the county had a relief stipend for citizens who assisted during outages based on reported asset lists, and Marlene's frantic call logs counted as activation. I donated the check to the local volunteer firehouse in Dad's name and slept better than I had in months. If there's a moral, it's this: fill out your HOA surveys truthfully, but keep your boundaries tighter than a vacuum seal. And when someone shows up at 3 a.m. demanding your outlet for vinyl nostalgia, remember that the loudest music in the world is the sound of code violations screaming down a legal hotline. The fallout from Marlene's midnight power grab would have been juicy enough gossip to dine on for months, but my cul-de-sac has always had a flair for encore drama. The very next Monday evening, I was outside tossing a squeaky frisbee for Dax when I saw him first. Trent schlepped up the sidewalk dragging what looked like a rolling coffin draped in a painter's tarp. He avoided eye contact, jaw clenched, but curiosity outmuscled my disinterest. "New home project?" I called, mostly to be civil. The bridal fiasco should have taught him boundaries. yet something told me he doubled down on bad ideas. He paused, breathing hard. The wheels on the crate squeaked in protest. "I'm moving equipment into storage," he muttered. "The clubhouse cancellation wrecked our plans. Can't leave anything on HOA property now that it's under inspection, can we?" I almost felt sorry for him, almost, until a corner of the tarp slipped, revealing gleaming walnut veneer. My gut sank. That wasn't a storage crate. It was a custom tube-amp console worth more than my college car. I'd overheard Trent brag about importing it from Germany, and right now it was headed, if the front yard geometry lined up, straight for my driveway. "I appreciate the detour," I said, planting myself between him and my garage. "But this isn't a loading dock." He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just need to stash it somewhere dry overnight. You're the only neighbor with a side shed deep enough. I'll pick it up tomorrow. Promise." He might as well have asked to borrow my social security number. "Not gonna happen, Trent." His nostrils flared. "Look, the new board won't let me keep gear in the clubhouse until repairs finish, and Marlene refuses to take my calls. I'm out of options. There's a commercial storage lot 2 miles south with 24-hour access," I said, retrieving my phone. "And I'm happy to text you the number." He all but stomped a foot. "They want a month's rent up front. I'm tapped out after the replacement venue and lost deposits. Come on, man. One night." The last time I trusted Trent for one night, I wound up with sheriff's deputies on my lawn. I shook my head. I don't do unsecured liabilities, especially when they hum at 400 volts. He started gearing up for a rant, but Dax chose that moment to return the frisbee, jaws clamping the neon disc like a rubber guillotine. Trent's speech bubble popped. He spun the console around and trudged off, cursing under his breath about selfish neighbors. Figuring that was the end of it, I showered, answered a few work emails, and turned in early. At 1:06 a.m., Dax's low growl dragged me awake. Something metallic clanked outside. I threw on slippers, grabbed my flashlight, and stepped onto the porch. The motion light flickered alive to reveal Trent, again, this time squatting by my exterior outlet with a fresh extension cord in hand. Deja electric deja vu. "Touch that outlet and I call the cops," I said, voice echoing harder than I intended. He jumped, cord whipping like a startled snake. "Easy, I'm not stealing. My console needs a climate-controlled environment, so I set up in my van. Battery died. Just need to top off." His eyes were ringed in sleepless red. "That cable is pointed toward my shed," I observed. He glanced behind him, busted. "Fine," he admitted. "I parked it alongside your fence where it's flat." He gestured vaguely down the drive. "The HOA streetlights are still down. Couldn't see my own breaker panel." "So your master plan is to siphon my electricity again because you messed up?" I folded my arms. "Didn't the deputy explain consent last time?" He tried on a wounded puppy look. "I figured you'd charge me. I even brought cash." He brandished a crumpled $10 bill. "That's not cash, that's an insult." I aimed the flashlight straight at the van. The rear doors stood open, revealing tubes glowing like demon coals. The console was powered up inside the vehicle, unsupervised. Presumably bridging 2 low-grade inverters Trent had daisy-chained together. The smell of ozone drifted across the driveway. I spotted the real hazard instantly. A gas can wedged beside a space heater, both sitting on carpet. He'd built a rolling Molotov cocktail. My patience evaporated. "Turn everything off," I barked. "Unplug, close the doors, and get off my property before you torch the block." He stared, torn between panic and offense. "You can't talk to me like—" A blistering pop crackled from inside the van, followed by a curl of acrid smoke. We both froze. Dax lunged forward, barking. "Kill the power," I shouted, sprinting past Trent. I yanked the van's side door wider, slammed the console's main toggle down, then heaved the space heater out onto the gravel where it hissed in the rain. Trent fumbled with the extension cord, finally severing it. We stood there, breathing hard, watching the glow die. My flashlight beam swept the interior, a brown scorch mark spider-webbed across the equipment rack. If it had caught, we'd have woken the entire subdivision to a rolling fireworks show. Trent's shoulders sagged. "I didn't know it was that bad," he whispered. "Because you never asked," I said, softer now but firm. "Look, vintage gear is cool, I get it. But you've turned your wedding into a city block liability. You're done freelancing power off neighbors." "Got me?" He swallowed, eyes slick with frustration. "Yeah." I stepped back. "I'm calling the fire marshal for a courtesy check. You can wait or leave." He looked like he wanted to bolt, but guilt anchored him. While we waited for the marshal's late-night quick response unit, Dad must have pulled strings. Trent confessed the whole snowball. Marlene had promised him carte blanche use of clubhouse resources if he supplied his prestige audio for HOA functions. In exchange, he'd record free promo videos for her real estate side hustle. When the outage hit, Marlene called in the favor, assuming I'd be her convenient battery. The rest spiraled into the disaster we'd lived. I listened, arms resting on the van's open door. The tale smelled of bored cronyism from the start. "So you risked a neighborhood meltdown for a handshake deal," I summed up. He winced. "I know, and now Lindsay, my fiancée, thinks I sabotaged our own wedding." Before I could respond, the marshal truck rolled in, lights low to avoid waking every household. 2 inspectors verified no hidden embers, then wrote Trent a citation for improper fuel storage and unsafe wiring inside a vehicle. Nothing criminal, but the fine stung. They also snapped photos for their ongoing HOA investigation. When they left, Trent and I stood alone beneath the guttering streetlights someone had finally fixed earlier that afternoon. "I appreciate you stopping it," he said. "I'll pay for the cleanup. Just learn the lesson," I answered, feeling the anger leak away. "No more midnight cables. No more assuming you're entitled to someone else's resources. And for what it's worth, if you need advice on safe power distribution, I'll help, but in daylight on neutral ground and with proper gear." He nodded, genuine remorse etched deep. "Deal." I went back to bed, half expecting another disturbance, but dawn arrived quietly. That morning, an electrician's van appeared at Trent's driveway. True to his word, he was paying for professional help. Life might have returned to ordinary suburbia if not for the surprise envelope that landed in my mailbox 2 weeks later, a certified summons. Marlene, still licking her wounds, had filed a small claims suit against me for emotional distress and reputational harm, allegedly inflicted by my refusal to provide power and by my malicious campaign to oust her. Her complaint sought $7,500, the maximum in county small claims plus court costs. I laughed so hard Dax tilted his head in canine confusion. Then I called my buddy Neil, a civil litigation attorney who owed me one for a winter snowblower rescue. He practically begged to represent me pro bono because, in his words, "I've always wanted to cross-examine an HOA queen bee." Preparation over the next month revealed juicy documents unearthed by the county inspector. Marlene had sidestepped required permits when the clubhouse underwent a cosmetic makeover last year. She'd also borrowed HOA reserve funds to hire Trent as an unofficial contractor, listing the expense as sundry maintenance. That paper trail, combined with witness statements, painted her lawsuit as pure retaliation. Court day arrived like the climax of a community theater mystery. The small claims courtroom held maybe 30 seats, yet half the neighborhood crammed inside. Word of Marlene's gambit had traveled, and residents smelled free entertainment. The clerk had to open the sliding partition to accommodate overflow. Marlene strutted in wearing a power red blazer. Her attorney, an acquaintance from her brokerage office, lugged a box of color-coded binders. Meanwhile, Neil and I brought one slim file folder. Truth didn't require bulk rate. When the judge called the case, Marlene's counsel launched into a speech about my obstruction of community welfare and public humiliation. He painted me as a chronic complainer bent on dismantling volunteer leadership. I almost admired the creativity. Then Neil rose, greeted the bench respectfully, and asked permission to submit 2 documents: the police report from the trespass night and the county violation packet. The judge skimmed, eyebrows climbing. Neil added sworn testimony from Trent admitting Marlene instructed him to run cords onto my property without permission, and that she'd promised to shield him from liability. Marlene's face tightened like a faulty drumskin. Her attorney scrambled, objecting that the testimony was coerced. The judge overruled. Trent's affidavit was notarized and voluntary. Neil's final grenade was a spreadsheet of HOA expenditures, highlighting 3 unapproved payments to Marlene's staging company, checks signed by Marlene herself, in direct conflict with the bylaws requiring dual signatures for purchases over $500. The judge looked up, adjusting her glasses. "Miss Marlene, these indicate potential fiduciary breaches far exceeding any claimed emotional distress. Have the board treasurer and auditor reviewed these?" Marlene sputtered. "Those are miscategorized vendor fees, Your Honor. We'll clarify at the next audit." The judge set the printouts aside. "For now, the plaintiff's claim appears retaliatory and lacking merit. Case dismissed with prejudice." She paused a beat, gaze steady. "Defendant, you may pursue costs." Neil stood. We waive fees, Your Honor, but request a referral of the financial irregularities to the state HOA oversight office. So ordered, the judge said, slamming the gavel. Marlene spun on her heel and marched out, high-heeled clicks echoing like a faltering metronome. The gallery buzzed. Someone actually applauded. The bailiff barked hush. Outside the courthouse, Trent approached me. If you hadn't stopped me that night, who knows what would have happened? He extended a hand. I shook it. Lindsay and I reset the wedding date. Smaller venue, battery speakers, you're invited, no strings attached. Only if you promise not to DJ with gasoline, I joked. He laughed, really laughed, and for the first time since moving in, I saw Trent relax. 2 months later, the HOA elected an entirely new board, comprised mostly of practical homeowners who favored pothole repairs over paint shade micromanagement. Their first act was to institute an emergency resources policy written by an actual attorney. It stated, use of privately owned generators shall be strictly voluntary, limited to bona fide life safety emergencies, with advance sign-up for compensation at fair market fuel rates. Requests may not occur between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. unless authorized by emergency services. They titled it the Dax Clause, in honor of my watchdog whose timely growls arguably saved the neighborhood from a van fire. Someone even printed a cartoon of Dax wearing a hard hat, which now hangs on the clubhouse bulletin board. Marlene, meanwhile, faced a formal audit. Investigators found her bookkeeping so creative it belonged in an art museum. She was ordered to repay misused funds and barred from any board position for 5 years. She slashed her for sale signs around town and rebranded under her maiden first name, hoping clients wouldn't connect dots. But the internet never forgets. Her commissions dried up faster than spilled spirit level in August. As for me, I held onto my generator, still pristine. Yet something shifted. The new board organized quarterly disaster prep workshops, and they asked if I'd demonstrate safe hookup procedures. I agreed on one condition. The HOA would subsidize heavy-duty cables and locking receptacles for any volunteer lenders, so no one ever had to run a neon noodle across soggy grass again. They agreed unanimously. Workshop day felt like a block party crossed with a science fair. Kids drew chalk lightning bolts while adults learned wattage math. I wheeled my generator onto the driveway, explained grounding rods, surge protectors, carbon monoxide placement. Even Trent pitched in, showing how to store fuel safely, his citation now displayed as a laminated warning label. Near sunset, Lindsay swung by with a Tupperware of homemade lemon bars and slipped me a formal invitation to their rescheduled wedding. Unlike the blackout rehearsal, this one would be a noon garden ceremony at a historic park. I RSVP'd yes and offered to bring folding chairs. No generator needed, Lindsay smiled. We hired an acoustic trio. The wedding turned out perfect. Blue sky, live bluegrass, 0 extension cords. When the officiant announced them husband and wife, Trent shot me a thumbs up from the altar steps. I raised my water bottle in salute. A week later, a UPS truck delivered a package to my porch. A brand new set of noise-canceling headphones. High-end quality. Inside was a note in Trent's handwriting. For the next time someone calls at 3 a.m., T&L. Dax sniffed the box, tail thumping approval. Life settled into a new normal. The repaired streetlights shone, the clubhouse reopened with proper permits, and neighbors actually said hello instead of squinting at paint chips. Occasionally, I'd hear whispers of discontent from Marlene loyalists, but without her iron gavel, the grumbles faded into the ambient hum of suburbia. One rainy Thursday, I found myself alone in the garage, reorganizing shelves. I uncovered the original HOA disaster survey, the one that sparked this whole adventure. I smiled at the irony. A simple checkbox about available generator had turned into midnight cables, court showdowns, and a neighborhood renaissance. I grabbed a pen and added a new note under special skills. Neighborhood watchdog, human and canine. Because sometimes the biggest power source isn't fuel or amperage. It's a community finally learning to respect boundaries. Friends, thank you. See you soon.